Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is a home interview in Hammondsport, New York. It is the 30th of November 2006, approximately 1 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Robert L. Henbest, August 25th, 1923, Elmira, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
High school.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I've just seen a movie with friends. We came out and we heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a brother at Pearl Harbor.
Oh, you did?
He was in the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that when the planes came over, they all thought the Navy had screwed up again. And were dropping bombs and not realizing where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And then they saw the red circle. And they knew it was Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all running all over the place trying to get guns and shoot at the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine sent me a series of someone found a brownie in an old place where people put their clothes, locker,
Mm-hmm.
and they developed the film. They came up with a bunch of pictures taken on December 7th.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this fellow put them all together and sent me a copy.
Hmm.
I have it on my computer.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Well, when the war was going on in Europe, I decided that sooner or later I would be called.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I thought of was, I don't know how to drill. So I joined Company L, which was the New York State Army thing.
National Guard?
National Guard.
National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down there a couple nights a month and learned how to drill.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you join them? Do you recall?
Oh, that was back in it was after Pearl Harbor,
Mm-hmm.
41
Mm-hmm.
sometime.
Right.
Because then in 42, I decided I had to just figure out what I wanted to do. And my brother wanted me to join the Marines because he said, you'll be terrific in working in an office.
Mm-hmm.
And because I graduated from high school with honors in business administration.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't want the Marine Corps. Because even though you're working in an office, you're out plowing through someplace, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured the Air Force. I didn't want the Navy because I suffered motion sickness. And I thought, on a ship bouncing around, no.
Mm-hmm.
So over at Southside High School, somebody had put up, maybe the Air Corps, Army Air Corps, huge posters, pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight purser, and it listed their duties. And when I saw that, I picked navigator. And so then I went to the post office when they were having their tests for cadets. And the test concentrated on so many college things, math, and all I'd taken was arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
My father said, we can't send you to college, so take all the business courses you can take. And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the last one to leave the room because I was going to be embarrassed to have the guy say, "You didn't fill out any of these pages." Took it up to him, and he said, "You passed." Sent me through the room. Others had been sent out the other door to go home, and but apparently he saw something, and saw him in the other room and couldn't believe it. Had my physical, and was told to go home, and I would be notified when I was to call, was going to be called up. Well, when they did, I went to Atlantic City for basic training. And from Atlantic City, well, at Atlantic City, I guess that's when they discovered that my office training was going to be of value to them, because they kept mentioning it. So then from Atlantic City, I went to Williamsport, to what was called then the Williamsport Junior Dickinson College. It's now like Cumming. And there we were supposed to receive 2 years of college in 8 months. I thought I'd had it. When the first day I went to the math class, the lady said, "Well, you've all had 2 years of college, so we'll start with such and such." And I went up to her and I told her, and she said, "Well, you'll just have to try to fit in." So that was a week when I figured any day I'd be told, "Go down the road to the infantry." So a week later, she wasn't there anymore. And this young man, forgotten his name, I told him, and he was fantastic. He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll come to your room after the dinner time, and I'll teach you." And he did. Came every night, and no problem. But then I had another problem. We had to put in 10 hours of learning how to fly an airplane, and they had Piper Cubs, and I guess the young man that was to be my instructor didn't care for the job, and so he did everything to make me sick. We bounce all over. And so I ended up washing the Piper Cub 10 times after each flight. And I had various interviews with various officers, and but they never wanted to kick me out. They kept me in. From there I went down to the Psych Center, which was in, it's down south someplace. And a friend of mine told me that he had, down there we had all these psychological things. You had to hold your finger out in a little circle and not move it, and so forth. Well, anyway, he washed out, and probably they wanted him to, because he'd had psychology, psychiatric training, and they wanted him there. And he came to me and he said, "I'm going to tell you a secret. Don't tell anybody that I told you, because you're not supposed to know." But he said, for all 5 Air Corps positions, pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight purser, and gunner, he said, you scored 5. It was 0 to 5, 5 being the highest. So that made my day, because I didn't want to be a pilot. And at that point, they were insisting that I was going to be a fighter pilot. And I thought, I'll kill myself. So I decided to use that information and get what I wanted. I still thought I wanted to be a navigator. And it worked. I went to Maxwell Field, took cadet training, and from there they sent me down to a place near Arcadia, Florida. There's an air school there. And I learned to fly a Stearman. I even soloed. I had a terrific instructor. But the next step was the basic training, where you would learn flaps and raising your landing gear and so on. And that was the next one after that was, you know, P-51 and so forth. So I decided I would wash myself out. And of course, I had an awful time. You wouldn't believe the time I had trying to wash myself out. Because my instructor would take me up and I would do everything perfect. Then I would come down and land, and he'd motion for one of the military pilots to come over and take me up for a check ride. And I would hear him say, he's ready, take him up. And then I would screw up. See, I didn't want to pass. And I knew I was safe because I could get one of these other jobs. Well, meanwhile, a young man came in, one of these real short, husky, cocky types. I could still see him in my mind. Came in from the 8th Air Force. He'd finished his missions as a bombardier. And he told us about being a bombardier. And he sold me a story completely. I made up my mind that's what I was going to be. And really the bombardier had the best job on the plane. So when they sent for me to come to this building where they would tell you you're down the road to the infantry, they told me to come in. And they said, well, and then they told me I scored 5 and everything. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a bombardier. So from there I went to Midland, Texas, and became a bombardier. And it was, being a bombardier was exactly what I should be. When I think about it now, yes, that's exactly what I was.
Why?
I was a calm, steady fellow. Nothing rattled me. Flak hitting the plane, sounded like someone throwing stones on a tin roof. And a plane blew up on one of my missions. My left wing plane blew up, and I just looked out and felt sorry for the guys. I knew them all. But I continued synchronizing on the target. And yes, I was meant to be a bombardier. And when we went to, well, you don't want all this, you know, I graduated from Bombardier School, and on graduation day, a B-24 landed, and the co-pilot was from Elmira. I'd gone to school with him, Frank Easy. And he showed me all through the plane. I thought, oh yes, this is exactly what I want. And but then they assigned me to B-17. I didn't want to be in a B-17. Too cramped and hard for the Bombardier to get at the bombs and so forth. So I managed to stay with B-24s. And we had to go to, I had to go to Casper, Wyoming, to join a crew. That's where they put the crew together, in Casper. And I remember I was the last one to arrive of the 10 guys in the room. And the 9 of them were saying, I wonder what kind of a jerk we're getting for a Bombardier. So, can he hit anything, you know? That was their concern, because that's what you were going to do. Blow things up. Urban renewal for the Nazis. And we had to go out, make a night flight, because I had to drop, they had to, you know, try me in different things to make sure I could do it. Well, the target was out in the field someplace with a light in the center, and I synchronized on the light, and I killed the light. Well, that made me a hero of my crew. Boy, he hit that light. And you know, they've never forgotten it. 3 of them came to my home a couple of years ago, and that was the first thing they popped up with to tell the family that was there. But they knew they had a good Bombardier. He knocked the light out of the target. Then they sent us down to Topeka, Kansas, and we picked up a brand new B-24L, which is a beautiful plane. The Bombardier had big bubbles on the sides where I didn't have any windows, except at the front, you know, on the other plane. And the Navigator had big bent windows. So we flew that to Italy, and we couldn't land at Gioia, Italy, because they'd had so much rain, the field was all muddy. So they sent us on to Casa Lucia, further up. Mussolini had built a chain of airfields, and then the Americans came in and enlarged it. And we landed there, and they had us sleep with temporarily with some fellows in a tent. And the next morning a Jeep came roaring up, and this colonel came hurrying in, and he said, "Is there a Bombardier on this crew?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'm it." And he said, "Great, you're now assigned to me." So that's how we got into the 451st Bomb Group. And,
Now, was it your whole crew or just you?
No, the whole crew.
Whole crew.
The plane, the crew. And he promptly wanted to see if I could bomb. So they finished the mission, and they always put pictures up in the squadron headquarters to show how the Bombardier did on that mission. And I came in with the other 3 officers, and I guess I had a lot to say about the pictures. The bombs were everywhere. The target was here, but the bombs were all over everywhere. And I made comments about it, and they heard me. I was on the next mission. And the next mission was, and they had me lead it, and we were to blow up a big munitions complex that the Germans had. We destroyed it completely. They sent me up the next day, and I destroyed the target. They sent me up the next day, and I destroyed the target. After that, the colonel really loved me because his group bomb score was the lowest in all the groups, and it just scored, it came right up, you know. And
Let me ask you something. Was there any particular reason why the other fellows were missing the target till you came along? Was it just...
I couldn't believe what I saw. Crew members loading their Bombardier on a truck to go out to the plane because he couldn't get up on the truck himself, he was drunk.
Oh.
A number of Bombardiers had been killed being in the front of the plane,
Mm-hmm.
the nose turret. And I guess those fellows just were scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I know on one crew that I've had to fly with, when I became lead bombardier, that I seldom flew with the crew I trained with. They were always putting me with a lead crew.
Mm-hmm.
And this navigator was 6'2", and I don't know how much he weighed. But as we got to we had flak suits on. As we got to the target and I was synchronizing, down he came from his navigator perch, right on top of me. And I couldn't move. He was scared to death. And I told him, I said, I have to work the bomb site. Get off me, you know. And he managed to give me some room so I could work, and the mission was a success. But that's the way so many fellows were. He was using my body and my flak suit, plus his flak suit. He had his head covered. And
Now, when was your first mission? Do you remember the date on it or anything at all? You kept a log?
well, this is my diary. I should have brought the log. That would have, but I don't know.
Well, that's
I mentioned
okay.
it to a friend of mine. He said, "Oh, they won't want that stuff. They just want to know how you felt."
Well, we do, but it was, you know, it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
So you kept a diary also then?
Mhm.
When you were going to drop the bombs, how did you arm them?
On the way up,
Mm-hmm.
I would go back in the bomb bay.
Did you take your chute
Pull-
off when you went
pull-
back there?
Huh?
Did you leave your chute on when you went back there, or take it off? Do you remember?
Sometimes on, sometimes off.
Okay.
But I had to pull the pins
Mm-hmm.
out of the fuses. And I carefully put the pins in my pocket, because if we aborted the mission,
Uh-huh.
I had to put the pins back in,
Mhm.
or we couldn't land with loaded bombs, you
Mhm.
know. I don't
Now,
know.
did the bombs have a pin at each end, or just at the fuse end? Someone mentioned, didn't they, that
Yeah.
they had a pin near the propeller end also? Did they have two pins?
Two fuses,
Uh-huh. Okay.
depended on the bomb,
Mhm.
too. Because we had fragmentation clusters, and they didn't. But the big bombs did.
Mm-hmm. How many missions did you fly?
23.
What was the majority of your targets? Do you remember?
We bombed the Lind LANZ in Austria, the Linz marshalling yards a great many times. In fact, I have a picture at home showing the marshalling yards, huge, and it's just a lot of pots where the bombs blew up. And the Germans finally gave up trying to recover, but it was a main thing coming up from Italy, you see. We bombed munitions, factories.
Were you ever in Enruns to Poesti?
That had just ended when I got there. In fact, the first day when we woke up in our new system, the planes came back, and many of the planes, the guys were bailing out because they couldn't land the plane safely. And I thought, and then they would fill out forms to be awarded some sort of insignia showing that they had bailed out. And I thought, well, I guess I'll be getting one of those.
That was the Caterpillar, wasn't it?
Yeah. We almost did bail out. Over no, I was in Austria. We'd gone on a mission, and this was probably towards the middle of my missions. And we were coming back from the mission, and see, the Bombardier, one of the Bombardier's jobs, to give him something to do besides drop bombs, was he was in charge of the 6-man crew, the enlisted men. And when we were coming back, the pilot called me and said, "You better get the crew together because we're running out of gas. And we're going to have to bail out." Klagenfurt was the place. Klagenfurt, Austria. And I didn't think it was a good idea because the people in Klagenfurt were killing Bombardiers. So I never wore any insignia or anything, so they wouldn't know. You know, they were killing them over in Yugoslavia too, and in northern Italy, because family members had been killed, you know. Anyway, I opened the bomb bay doors, and I figured, well, the Bombardier has to set an example, so I sat down on the catwalk, and my parachute was ready, chest packs, what we used, and I had checked the enlisted men, they were all lined up, and the navigator and everybody else, and it was just the pilot and co-pilot and the flight engineer up on the deck, and he slowed the plane down, he dropped the plane down in altitude, and it was all ready for us to drop out, and the flight engineer happened to turn his head and look at some gauge, and he yelled to the pilots and to me, you know, "Stop, we got a whole wing full of gas." The flight engineer had goofed. He had failed to flick the switch. So I was that close to dropping out.
Did your plane ever receive much damage?
Oh yes, yeah. One day the colonel came to me and he said, "Brass is coming up from Bari, Italy." That's where 15th Air Force headquarters was, in Bari, Italy. And they want to see you, how you would do skip bombing. And so they came up, and the colonel decided to fly the plane for them. So they were in a B-24, and we were in a B-24. And I was the bombardier to do the demonstration. We were getting into, we were doing it over down by the Adriatic, and we were just about ready for me to take over the plane. You see the bombardier steer the plane to the bomb site.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there was this loud bang, and I shot over the bomb site, and my head was wedged in that little space. They had an awful time getting me out. The colonel had slid his plane into ours, bent our wing down. Instead of the wing being like this, it was like this. And he took off half of our tail. You know, we had the two.
Right.
And he had problems, but he turned around and went back to the base. And my pilot was the squadron commander, and he was an excellent pilot. And he had lost a lot of control. So what he did for a long time, he just kept trying to slide the plane around, because we were headed toward Yugoslavia. And he managed to turn it around and head back to the base. We landed, no problem. So we had half a tail and a bent wing.
Now, were they able to repair a plane like that?
Oh yes, yes.
They were.
Yeah. Yeah, they repaired it.
No, I forgot to mention, when you first arrived over there, you said you had a B-24L. Did you get to name it?
Yeah, my pilot, the first pilot was Roger's Cessna. Well, Roger's uncle was the Cessna that built Cessna aircraft. And he had a friend, Milt Kniff, who drew Terry and the Pirate. And he had Milt Kniff come to our plane and sketch Roger's dog. And Roger called his dog Topper. It was a black, one of these little black dogs. And so that was painted on both sides of the plane, which was nice.
Now, you called the plane was called Topper, or?
Yeah, Topper, yeah. Everyone had to have something on their plane. Some of them were interesting, but that was nice that he did that. But Roger's uncle was proud of what we were doing, and so he did that because we were getting a brand new plane. Now, we flew over in that plane, and when the war was over, the group commander, Colonel Stefan, came to me and he said, "Bob, you never went to Egypt, you never went to a couple other places. You did go to Rome, and you met the Pope, but you always wanted to do your mission." So he said, "I'm giving you your plane that you came over in to go home in." So we flew home in it. And I had been told that actually they wanted to get me home as fast as they could to put me on B-29s and go to the Pacific. But the Pacific War was winding down fast, and I figured it'd be over. So I contended that I smelled gas in the plane. I didn't smell gas in the plane. But I convinced Roger Cessna we should make short trips back. So we flew all the way down Africa, over to Ascension Island. We were supposed to go from Liberia and go straight over. but we went all the way down to Africa, over to Ascension, to Brazil. And we went from one place in Brazil to another, and eventually we got to some island in the Caribbean, and then came up to South Carolina.
Did you get to stop in Egypt?
No, we didn't go that
Oh,
way, no.
Okay.
That was too far to the west. So, you know, make a good, you'll never be there again. So, we had a good time. What was I going to
Now, you had mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have them escort you at all?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they weren't there at first.
Mm-hmm.
But when they did, they would come up from their base, which was in northern Italy, and we would wave to them, and we would wave to crews flying in B-17s too, because our plane was faster. We'd go right by a B-17.
Now, did you ever encounter German jets?
Yes. And we wondered what the devil it was. Because all of a sudden, you know, they never shot at us. But I think they were just testing.
Mm-hmm.
And but some planes said they shot at them, and they could shoot a B-24 down very easily, because it's about 240 miles. And yeah, we were fortunate that Hitler didn't like the jet, and that's why they didn't make so many. He was more for the V-1 rocket. When we flew over, we had an interesting trip. We went into the Casbah. One of the guys had quite an interesting time there.
What happened?
I shouldn't have brought that up.
Now you have to continue, you did.
I was told to tell the enlisted men, you're not permitted to go to the Casbah. Well, J.D. Miller came to me and he said, I got to see a Casbah woman. And I said, J.D., you'll be arrested. He said, I can't, I've got to do it. I said, all right, go ahead. And he left, but he came back soon. And he looked terrible. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, I met this nice-looking young lady, and she took me to her room someplace in the Casbah, and you shouldn't be here. And we stripped, and he said, just as I was about to get on top of her, he said, they had dim lights. He said, I saw all these sores on her body. And he said, I threw up all over her.
Oh, jeez.
and got up and put my clothes on and raced back here. And I said, well, I'm glad that happened to slow you down. So, well, we had some interesting times. There was one mission came up, and we were loading up, you know, to go on the mission. And a couple of the enlisted men came to me and they said, we've got a problem. I said, what's that? We've all got diarrhea. And then I found out that the co-pilot had diarrhea. The only ones that didn't was myself and the pilot and co-pilot. So I said to the enlisted men, okay, go to the mess hall, hurry up because we've got to get off. And come back with one of these big cooking metal things. I said, be sure to get the lid. And also get a couple rolls of toilet paper. And put it on the rear of the catwalk. That's where it was. So all the way up, back and forth they went. And then when we were coming back, they called me up. They called me various names because we were very close crew. Some crews weren't that close. But they would call me, they'd call up and they'd say, hey Bombardier, or hey, LeRoy is my middle name, which I didn't tell you. And they'd say, hey LeRoy, or something else, or hen shit, you know. And they called me up and they said, it's fall. What do we do now? And I said, all right. We were approaching Fort Klagenfurt again. And I told the pilot, I said, drop down in altitude. And I said, we've got to get rid of the container. So I opened the bomb bay doors and I told the guys, well, get it so we're going to bomb Klagenfurt with it. And when the time was right, I told him, okay, kick it out. It went out, the lid came off. And I don't know what the people down below thought. We got rid of it. There were amusing things that happened. But I was glad that I was born to be calm and cool. Nothing seemed to disturb me. When there was a lot of flak, the navigator sat up above me and he would tell me, you're going to get your head blown off, because I'd take my helmet off and be looking out the window. I wanted to see what was, you know, all the flak and what was going on. And probably had half a brain then, but, you know, it didn't bother me. Then sometimes flak would hit our plane. One piece came right through, just in front of me, came right through. I always looked for it. I wanted to take it home as a souvenir. And I never found it. I don't know where it went. Maybe it went all the way through the plane.
Now, when you reached back to the States, what did you do? Were you discharged at that point, or?
When we got back to the States, they gave us a 30-day leave. Mm-hmm. And I was given orders to go to Chatham Air Force Base down south, and I think it was in the Carolinas. And when I got there, there were B-29s all over the place. And they told me, we're giving you 3 jobs because the war ended. I was to be assistant base adjutant. I was to be head of the officers club. And I was to be a bombardier instructor on B-29s. And they gave me a Jeep. And so I decided to split my day up in thirds, and that's what I did. And the fellow that was club officer before I got there took me around and showed me, and we had Germans in the cooking area. And, I had purchased insignia for the hat I found someplace. It looked like gold, you know. But when I walked through the mess hall with these Germans working, they were all looking at it. And I think they thought I was someone special somehow, because everyone else had a different one, you know. But it was interesting doing that. I built a swimming pool because we had slot machines. And my predecessor said, when you don't hear any noise coming from that room, go in, take your key, and unlock the back, and take a handful of coins, and go around and start up all the slot machines. And it worked. It was just like buttons coming to a flame, you know. The guys would just pour into the place, and we made a lot of money and built a swimming pool.
How did you compare the B-29 to the B-24? I know you never flew it in combat, but
The B-29, my first couple of flights were very exciting because, you know, the 29 is all glass nose.
Right.
The Bombardier sits right behind that glass. And the 29, of course, is bigger. And when we roared down the runway to take off, my God, I thought I was in the air by myself, because the pilots were here and the others were back in the plane. And when we landed, that was a thrill. You come roaring down to land and you're right there, the first one, you know. It was interesting.
Did you have a story about a new pilot missing the target because of wrong coordinates?
Yeah,
You want to tell us about that?
yeah. Poor Lieutenant Smith. Anyway, it was our mission to Rovereto, Italy. Rovereto at that time was a stopover from Italy to get into Germany. And they had a marshalling yard there. And the Germans were fleeing Italy as fast as they could get out of there. And they'd already killed Mussolini. And so, you know, with the war ending, they didn't know what was going to happen. So they were fleeing, and they asked me to lead a mission to take out the marshalling yard. And that was fine to do that. I said, who's the pilot? And he said, Lieutenant Smith. And I said, no, I won't fly with him. And he said, the colonel said, the colonel himself even came down to talk me into it. And he said, the war is ending. He wants to be the first pilot in the plane instead of a co-pilot. And give him the opportunity, Bob. And I said, no, because we won't have a good mission. He's too excitable. And he'll just, you know. So I had to give in. And so we went off on the mission. We turned on the IP, the initial point, start the bomb run. And Rovereto, you know, it's the mountains and the Roveretto's down in a little space there. The town and this huge marshalling yard next to it. And I decided I better see if everything was gonna be all right at the beginning. So we turned, and I asked the pilot for a level, and he dumped my gyros in my bomb sight. Well, I quickly capped them, and I'm sure I cursed him. And I told him, "You dumped my gyros. Now keep the plane level, you know." So we went on further, and I saw the target. I synchronized on it. Everything was ready. The bomb bay doors were open, and so forth. I asked him for another level, and it was so different that I was concerned, but I couldn't abort. It was too late. And so I kept telling him, and he screamed at me, so I knew he had flipped. So what do you do? So I tried to compensate for what he was doing, and the bombs went out. And when I saw the bombs drop, I knew it was a failed mission. And I watched to see where they hit, and they didn't hit the target. And they hit the town. And that bothered me for all these years, until the Star Gazette, I think it was a Veterans Day issue, they came to the house, and Pfeiffer wanted to interview me, and so he wanted me to tell about a mission that I didn't like, you know. So I told him about it. Well, the strangest thing happened. A man and his wife came to the house and said, "We have to tell you something. We lived in Roveretto during the war. They're Italian. And we were there when your bombs dropped. And since you told us when you did it in the paper, we knew what happened." They said the only person killed was a Gestapo guy, and which wouldn't bother anybody. So, but you didn't get any civilians, and you did damage some of it. Some of your bombs hit. So I have their name and address at home. I thank them. They were so excited about it. Their son joined the Air Force here, and because they moved from Italy here, and they want him to come visit with me sometime when he's home on leave. It is strange how it works out. Here I fretted about killing lots of people, and only when I killed the Gestapo guy.
Now, you received a Distinguished Flying Cross. What? That wasn't for that bombing mission you told us with the bucket, was it?
No. On that mission, we were trying out using radar. And so I flew in a plane that was stretched, so the deck was longer and they could have a radar equipment there. And they had taken me over to another group that had a model radar system, so I could see, you know, how it worked and so. And I came back thinking, oh God, we'll never win the war. So, went up on this mission, and I was the Bombardier, and the radar man was back there. And of course, he was doing his thing, and it was cloudy. Couldn't see anything. And we were going this way, and for something to do, I set the bomb sight all up, as though I was going to do the bombing, see? Rather than just sit there. So, as we came along, I happened to look out to the left, and there was an open space, and there was the target. And I called to the radar guy, and I said, "You're way off target. It's on our left. Turn off your equipment. I'm taking over the plane." So I did, and I swerved the plane over, and had just enough time to synchronize on it. And by luck, I wiped it out. And when the colonel got that, he promptly put me in for a DFC. So that's how I got that. And I got about 5 air medals. Each group did things differently. Some, if you flew 5 missions, you got an air medal. If you destroyed 5 targets, you got an air medal. So my colonel preferred to have things get done. So if I had 5 successful missions, I got another air medal. So that's how I got my 5 air medals.
Now you stayed in the reserves, was it, or?
Well, when I went to Fort Dix to be mustered out, I couldn't see giving it up. I had all this training, and things were still going on in the world, and so I signed up for the reserve, and I ended up being CEO of the reserve unit in the southern tier. Elmira was headquarters, and I had 4 small groups across the southern tier. So, and I also had an M-Day assignment. During the Cold War, I received information they wanted me to have an M-Day assignment at Offutt Air Force Base, which was SAC headquarters. And they never called me up because the Cold War didn't get hot.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect or changed your life?
I think it had big effect.
In what ways?
Being a very in-charge type person, because I had these 6 men that depended on me to see that things got done and so forth. And I think it had a big effect on me. Not be very serious about things. Even now, I'm not, as Bob knows, with my computer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the interview.
Oh,
Oh,
you.
very quickly, do you want to have him hold up that photo?
Which, this one?
That one there, yeah. Or you can hold it and I can zoom in on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was this taken? This was on your retirement?
The top picture appeared in Stars and Stripes, and I was the Bombardier.
I'm getting a
But the
little...
whole article was criticizing the ground crew for not hanging the bombs properly.
Mike, can you turn that a little? I'm getting some glare. Okay, that's good. I just want to...
And the bottom picture is your retirement picture?
No, the bottom picture is me in mess dress, and it was taken at the Warplane Museum in Elmira.
Oh, okay.
That was when General Olds came. They asked me to escort him around.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
He's got another picture where he was
That's not me.
I didn't think so. Matt
bad.
told a story about literally crapping at Germany. The last thing